Hello, how are you doing today? This afternoon I know is going to be quite busy and stressful at work, but I have the morning free, so I want to have some nice relaxing reading time, and I thought I would do a fun relaxing book haul. And I have about a dozen or so brand new books that have just been published in August here in the UK that I want to talk about. Some of these books I purchased myself, others publishers kindly sent me. Some of them are advanced copies. So yeah, I'm going to go through this group of books. First off, there is Mercury Pictures Presents Mercury by Anthony Marra, and this novel is about a girl named Maria who grows up in Italy during the time of Mussolini, and she and her mother flee the country and move to Los Angeles. And while she was growing up in Italy, her father took her to the pictures. She had this romantic idea about the movies, and 15 years later, she is working in the movie business. She's an associate producer at a movie studio, but she finds that she has lots of professional and personal difficulties, that the studio is on the brink of bankruptcy, and then she has a number of things going on in her personal life, with conflicts with her mother and her boyfriend, who is having a lot of difficulty with his acting career. And so it follows her story. And I read Anthony Marra's novel A Constellation of Vital Phenomena a number of years ago and loved that book, and I've been wanting to read more by him since then, and this has a beautiful cover and sounds like a really great new story. Housebreaking by Colleen, Hubbard, and this novel is about a woman that finds herself embroiled in a local scandal and after her parents' divorce, and the rest of her family turn their backs on her, and she's living alone in the one possession that she's inherited, which is the family home. And her uncle comes to reclaim this home, but she doesn't want him to have it. So she decides to take the house physically apart and move it to a place where it can be her own. So it's about that process and following that dramatic story. I believe it's set in New England, where the author was born and is from, but she now lives in the UK. So I'm kind of sympathetic to this story since I grew up in Maine and now live here in England. So I'm just really keen to read this. The Night Interns by Duffy, and this novel follows the story of three surgical interns working in a hospital over the course of the night, and the issues that they encounter there with the patients that they have to treat, but also the administrative difficulties of the hospital that they work in and that they encounter. And the author, Karis Davies, praised this novel. She says, with the dark humor and moral seriousness that make Duffy's writing so captivating, The Night Interns brilliantly portrays the excruciating stress of constantly feeling that what is expected of you may well be more than you are capable of achieving. And Duffy works in the medical profession himself, so this seems to be an area that he would be very knowledgeable about, and it sounds like a very moving story. Performance by Claudia Petrucci, and it's translated from the Italian by Anna Milano Appel. And this is the story of a woman who is a promising young actress, but she decides to get married and settle down. But then her theater director comes to find her and lures her back to the stage. And on the first night of her performance, of her return to the stage, something very dramatic happens. And so it follows that story. And I love novels about the theater and performance and like the whole line between acting and performing in our ordinary lives. And also August is Women in Translation Month, so I think this would be a great pick to read. And I have a new book which looks quite special, which is an anthology called Writing from Ukraine. And this is a collection of fiction and poetry and essays from 1965 onward, looking at the history and opinions and reflections of writers from that country. And as somebody that's been following the news about Ukraine and the conflict in Ukraine and finds it very distressing, I'd love to read more Ukrainian writers. And so I think this will be a great anthology to sort of dip in and really get a better, well-rounded understanding of the country, rather than just being this distant place that many of us have never visited and don't know all that much about, that it'll make it, a real place in our minds, rather than just reading about it in news reports. And so I'm looking forward to dipping into and reading a number of pieces from this to better understand the country. A new memoir called Belonging by Amanda Thomson, with an absolutely beautiful cover. And in this book, she reflects on her life in northern Scotland, about the environment around her and about family and identity. Recently I made a video about the shortlists for the Wainwright Prize for nature writing and conservation. And I think this book would be a great addition to that pile of books, because it's a lot about the natural environment in northern Scotland. And it also includes a number of illustrations and photographs taken by the author, so to sort of illustrate her experience living in northern Scotland. And yeah, it just looks like a beautifully presented book. The Passengers by Will Ashon, and this is obviously a proof of this new book, and it's kind of a nonfiction account where the author, between the years 2018 and 2021, traveled around the country, around Great Britain, and communicated with a number of people, asking them to talk about their experiences. Sometimes he would give them questions, prompting them, or he would ask them to tell him their deepest secret, and sometimes he just communicated with these people through letters. Sometimes he would journey to where they were and speak to them in person. So it's collecting these reflections and experiences of people across the country to kind of present this picture of the state of a nation. And actually the style of the book, because no one is credited with their accounts. You don't get anyone's names. They're just different numbered accounts giving people's reflections and point of view. And it sort of reminds me of the novel The Employees by Olga Raven. I never pronounced her name right. But anyway, yeah, it reminds me of the sort of style of that novel, although this is a nonfiction book. The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. I have this beautiful proof that was sent to me of this book. And this is a historical novel about a real ship called the Batavia that in the 1600s, it was one of the most impressive sea vessels of the time, but it crashed, and it was one of the biggest maritime disasters in history. And so it follows the story of a girl that was on board that ship, and following how she discovers lots of secrets and things that are going on in this ship in the 1600s. But then the story is there's also a parallel story about a boy in Australia who's growing up in this remote village on the coastline, and he's in mourning for his mother who died, living with his very stern grandfather, and how he makes a discovery there in this village, which is quite close to a place where lots of ships wrecked. So it's kind of about these parallel stories and how they intersect with each other, and sounds like a really fascinating historical fictional tale. Small Angels by Lauren Owen, and this is about a couple that is due to get married, and they are given the keys to a church called Small Angels, and they go in to explore this church and then discover that there are lots of hidden secrets in this village and to do with this church that they didn't realize, and they gradually uncover them. It's meant to be quite a thrilling Gothic tale. I love like a twisty Gothic story. So yeah, this would be a great one to sink into. American Fever by Aziz Amna, and this is a novel about a 16-year-old girl that travels from Pakistan to America, to rural Oregon, to live and study there as part of an exchange program, and about her experiences there, becoming accustomed to the very different culture of rural America, but also how she comes down with a very serious illness, and about her experiences surviving that. Next, totally coincidentally, there are two new novels that follow the stories of Nazi war criminals after World War II who left the country and tried to go into hiding. So first is The Disappearance of Josef Mengele, who was a real-life historical figure and who's, I think, known as the Angel of Death, and how there was a hunt for him for 3 decades. And so this tries to recreate his story, moving to South America and following his tale. It's described as a rigorously researched factual novel, so I think it is based on the truth as possible, but it is a fictional book. Then there is a reprint of a novel that was written in 1966 called The Glass Pearls by Emeric Pressburger, who was a screenwriter, but was also a Jewish survivor of the Nazis. And this is described as a Hitchcockian noir about a German gentleman that comes to live in London in 1965, but then a hunt for Nazi war criminals are going on, and his neighbors discover disturbing facts about him, so following that dramatic story. And finally, there's another new novel which also concerns World War II, which is Hinterland by Arno Geiger. And this is a novel following the story of a young German soldier who is wounded in 1944 and goes to a village in Austria to recover, and while he's there meets a number of different people and gets a whole new different perspective on this war that he doesn't really want to be fighting in. But as he heals and gets better, he gets new military orders, and how the conflict at that time is really coming to a head. So yeah, that sounds like a very dramatic story. So those are all the new books I want to talk about. Let me know if you've read any of these books and would recommend them, or if you're interested in reading any of those books now. I'd love to hear about that in the comments below, or if you get some relaxing reading time, what you've been reading recently and what you're looking forward to reading. I'd love to hear about that as well. But I hope you're doing well and have a good day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.